creating the title that works best for your story.
Many people seem to be quick to just tack on a title for their story idea after the fact. It may not even be the best for their story. They're quick to brand it, not realizing just how very important a story title is. It's the first way that the audience comes into contact with this thing that you've created. And you may have heard the saying, don't judge a book by its cover. But the first thing you see when coming across a story is its title. It's your first opportunity of communicating what this story and this world is all about. So a good title can carry people through to see what your story is like, invest time into it, even if this isn't your greatest writing. Of course, great writing can be enough to stand on its own, even if the title isn't super impactful or isn't particularly interesting. 1984 is an example of that. But the big thing is that both title and story enforce each other. If you have a good story, then the title works like its identity. The story's title helps shape how people see your story when experiencing it. And in the same way, the story that they experience helps shape how they see the brand that you've labeled the story by. So people can get an impression from both the title and the story itself. And both can work together to have a great effect in shaping the overall experience they get from it. So I'm going to give you some things to consider so that your title works great for your story. So one big thing to consider is that your title is punctual and impactful. Now this doesn't necessarily mean your title has to be short and sweet, but that can certainly help. Because remember, you're drawing in your potential audience through just a few words. So basically your word choice is very important because you've only got a few words to convey the story to an audience. But if you're artful about breaking this convention, then even a longer title can work if it fits with the story or the concept you want it to convey. So even with longer titles, you still want to be careful and conscious about being decisive and impactful with your choice of words. So I've had an idea for a project that I'm going to be trying to take on soon, and it's called The Frog That Took on the World. Now, that's kind of a longer title, but it still works because it's still impactful with the few choices of words that it uses, and it kind of draws the audience into wanting to know more about what exactly is going on here with the story. And that leads me into my next point, that you want your title to draw intrigue. So often with titles, they're usually either set up to draw intrigue or they can be very poetic, and both can be great when using these to name your story. But first and foremost, you'll be better off having a title that draws intrigue and possible interest. A poetic title is more abstract, like say Gray Skies. That would probably be too vague for the audience to want to be pulled into the story. So sometimes it helps when finalizing your title to iterate on it or try different variants. So for example, Gray Skies could become Graying Skies. So now it can be implied that these skies could be getting grayer with time, and now people might wonder what's exactly causing these skies to become more gray. So it could be time, maybe a character's perspective on life, maybe an ancient evil was causing it, whatever. That's just one example, but see how it has more potential in pulling people in now. And that's not a title I'm using, by the way, so feel free to use it if you want. But you could iterate on this even more to come up with something that could maybe draw even more intrigue and to be more unique to the type of story you're writing. And speaking of being unique, try to make the title as applicable and relevant as you can to what you're writing. Because remember, you're conveying your story with just a small amount of words. So it's easy to just slap a few words together that might have something to do with your story. But it's more worth it to put in effort to try to convey the essence of what the story is about. So it could speak on the themes, what the overall conflict is actually about on a philosophical level maybe, or what its whole purpose is in general. Or you could simply have something that's more titular to the story idea that everything in it revolves around, and you could name it after that. Like Jurassic Park, for example. It's not a super fanciful title, but it is effective because it's punctual, combines two ideas that are unique, dinosaurs in a theme park. And because the story revolves around this idea of man ruling over nature by creating a park of manufactured dinosaurs, it's relevant to the deeper themes of the story, which is the conflict of man versus nature. But let's say it's not that simple and you have a large story that revolves around multiple ideas that are different from one another. Maybe you have a variety of different genres in the story. And as a side note, I'll be doing a video on how to combine genres, so if that interests you, then be on the lookout for that. But if your story has a variety of different things, then still try to pull them together into something that's meaningful and still summarizes well, or something that can speak on these different aspects of the story. So titles can have layers of meaning if you craft them right. So I'll give you an example on that. I got a friend that's making a comic series, and it's actually pretty similar in premise to the one I'm making, and it's called The Closers. And the idea of it is that it's like based around these metalheads. They're like always closing up a shop in the late night hours, and the whole idea is that these metalheads get powers from the music that they make. And it's more like on the darker, grittier side. And I was telling him like maybe it'd be a cool idea if like since these closers are closing up shop in the late night hours, that maybe when they walk home they start experiencing like a lot of paranormal activity and stuff like that. So kind of gives it like a horror aspect to it. And he was all for it, and I feel like that makes the title even, it kind of gives it a deeper layer of meaning, because on the surface level it's about these guys that are always closing up the shop, but then you also got like these paranormal monsters and stuff that are going around and closing up the shop on someone's life, for example. And I feel like that just gives it that much more meaning to it and makes it a little bit more relevant. So when you're thinking of a title, try to come up with something that has more of those deeper layers of meaning to it. It could apply to your story on multiple different levels. And be careful with generic formats for a title, like The Adventures of So and So, or even The Blank of Blank. That one's used a lot. And be especially careful with this if you're working in the fantasy genre. Because, like I was saying earlier, it's very easy to just throw a bunch of cool sounding words together and just slap together a title. There's even a meme that I've seen going around where they have this chart, and basically the whole idea is like, so basically you got this chart and it just has a big list of a bunch of cool words that people use all the time in fantasy, and you can just put together the blank of blank, and then all of a sudden you've got a generic fantasy title. So like for example, The Blade of Darkness. Not saying that the words you use shouldn't sound good or be impactful, but if you just throw cool sounding words together, then it can come out pretty generic, and it might not even be relevant to what the greater essence of your story is about. But on the contrary, the typical formats for titles you see, those can work effectively with an intriguing choice of words, especially if it draws the reader's interest, like something that makes the potential audience have questions to get pulled into wanting to know more. Now, I don't like trying to give too many examples here, especially not for my own work, because mainly I want you guys to get creative and to not have some sort of preconceived image of what a good title is. But try to come up with your own unique ideas for what a good title could be, a good title that could apply to your stories. So these examples aren't the gold standards. I'm just trying to give examples and show you some of the things that make them work. So this comic series that I've been working on for a while, that I mentioned earlier, it was called Metalstone, and it kind of applies because the main characters are a bunch of metalheads that have powers from music, but I felt like that wasn't impactful enough. There was just something lacking in it. So I started trying to come up with some new ideas for what this could be titled. And I'm breaking my own rule here because it's in the format of The Blank of Blank. So the series is called The Saga of New Earth, and it's a 3-part series. So for each one, I've got a unique name for it. So the first series, it's called The Dreams of New Earth. The next one after that is the Prelude of New Earth. And then the one after that, the final series, would be called The Songs of New Earth. And I feel like it works because it still has that impact that I want. It's not just like milestone. Like that's still impactful, but these names kind of give it what I felt like was lacking. And not just that, but it kind of makes the audience question, like, they're talking about like a new earth here. What's that all about? Maybe I should check this out. So if you've come up with a cool title that kind of fits into those generic templates for what titles often are, as long as you feel like it's cool and effective still, then go for it. It doesn't really matter if it's in that generic format or not. The whole point is you don't want to just throw together generic sounding words and try to make it work, because it's just going to come off as bland. But if you are decisive about your choice of words and how they work together to give an effect on the audience, then you're coming at it from the right mindset. And basically that's the whole gist of what this video is about. So remember to be punctual but more impactful and decisive with your choice of words and your title. It can be intriguing and poetic if you want it to be, but it's more important that it's intriguing, that brings up a question in the audience, so that it pulls them in to want to see what your story is all about. And that's also very important to try to make your title as relevant to your story as it can be. And that can be on multiple levels about different aspects of your story, or it could even have layers of theme. And remember that a title is not only the first line of communication to your audience about what your story is like, but also a story can impact what someone's image of that title is, how they think about that title. And also it works the other way around too, how your title sort of helps shape how people think of your story, and it's how they identify that story. So I hope this has got your wheels turning, and if you want me to make more videos like this about writing, then go ahead and leave a like or comment. Make sure to subscribe to my channel to see more videos like this. And I wish you guys luck with writing your story. Peace.